Welcome to the Body Ethos Podcast, where we're shifting the culture from sickness to health. Before we dive in, please remember that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Body Ethos Podcast, where we're all about shifting the culture from sickness to health. I'm Jessica Whitmill, and today we're diving into a topic that affects so many children, but is rarely talked about, and that is educational trauma. Today, our guest is Breeanna Murphy. She is a dyslexia specialist and a mind, body, spirit release practitioner dedicated to helping children who are struggling with reading find success through structured literacy. Beyond just academics, Bree also works with the children who are experiencing stress regarding their learning and using mind, body, spirit release to uncover and heal those deeper root causes of educational trauma. So let's go ahead and dive in. Bree, thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited to talk about this topic with you. As a fellow MBSR practitioner, I love the niche that you're in and how you're helping people uncover that educational trauma and those emotional blocks they may have around learning specifically. So could you share a little bit about yourself and why you decided to focus on dyslexia and educational trauma?
Yeah. So I have a master's degree in literacy and started teaching in the early 2000s in California. I was a middle school, high school teacher, and then moved to Denver and ended up supporting schools for their entire Denver public schools and their entire literacy network, K through 12. So I had multiple different jobs in Denver public schools, but I was always supporting literacy. Fast forward a little bit, in 2012, we had our biological son, Landry. In 2013, we adopted our daughter, Lucy. And around 2015, when both of them were in kindergarten, around that time, I took a step back from working and kind of hung out a little before they went to kindergarten, hung out at home with them when they were in preschool. And when they started school, I put them in a Spanish immersion program, which was right down the street from our house. And I noticed that both of them were struggling independently to learn how to read. And they each had some big red flags for dyslexia. I am dyslexic. And so I was always looking for that on my radar. But also, as a literacy specialist, I had never been specifically trained in dyslexia. So it was something that I knew surface level about, but nothing really high level. And so everyone at the Spanish immersion program kept saying, it's okay that they can't read. They'll eventually pick it up. That's the message that I kept getting. Well, since I didn't know much about immersion programs, I kind of just leaned into the school. Towards the end of that year, I really realized that no, this is something bigger. And I ended up having both of them assessed for dyslexia, and both of them came back dyslexic. Now, my daughter Lucy is very different. She was adopted at 18 months old. And so she also is a second language learner, and there is some trauma there. And so me having had experience in all of these classes in connected parenting and trauma-informed parenting, I kind of always had that lens with teaching because of the classes I took during our adoption. And so what I was noticing were my kids were exhibiting these fight, flight, freeze, or fawn behaviors anytime they were put in front of a text. And I ended up doing deeper dives. And so I went back and got more education. I got more education to be a dyslexia specialist, a dyslexia advocate. I ended up studying what was called LETTERS, is the professional development that teaches you all about structured literacy and the science of reading. And I also got trained in Orton-Gillingham, which is the approach to teaching reading that focuses on sound and symbol connection. And a trajectory of learning. And so once I did that and I started working with my own kids, I thought, oh my gosh, there's so many parents out there that they're getting the same message from schools. Just wait, they'll get it. Just wait, they'll get it. Where our kids can't wait, because what happens is once you pass kindergarten, your reading is an essential part of your learning. And so if you are behind and you cannot do that because there is a channel in your brain that isn't there yet, or you haven't been taught the right way to approach language yet, then you're going to be traumatized because you have to go there every day. And so I opened my business and started tutoring kids in the neighborhood. And then COVID hit and everyone needed a tutor. And so I shifted to virtual tutoring. But then I also, as I built my curriculum on the back end, knowing that I wanted kind of growth mindset work in there, trauma informed work in there, and I wanted it to follow the trajectory of Orton-Gillingham, where kids were not only learning to hear it and write it, but to see it and say it and know the rules in this trajectory of learning so that they would be supported the entire way. I also knew there was something else there. And so then I went back, and got my mind, body, spirit release certifications. I did level 1, level 2, and level 3 because I knew when I watched my kids get clearings, something was lifted from the stress that they held, from that traumatic imprint, and they started to be able to sit and be able to take it in. So it was twofold. It was knowing the right way to be able to teach and the approach to literacy that worked with the brain science, as well as like working with the trauma. And so I saw such a change in my own kids that I knew I had to apply it to my business. And so that's what I do.
I love your story, Bree, because I think it connects with so much of what I'm doing in my practice, right? Like helping people on the physical side. You're helping children learn in a structured way.
Yep.
And also combining that trauma informed, emotional, energetic piece of things. And
Yes.
that's when things really unlock, right? Because
Yeah.
that's often the missing piece of a lot of things that a lot of us are dealing with. There's always that emotional, energetic root cause.
Yes.
And so for your kids, it seemed like, as soon as you're able to get their nervous system to
Mm-hmm.
stop responding in a fight or flight response every time they sat down to do schoolwork
Yeah.
because they felt more confident and they were able to let go of that emotional and energetic burden that they had, then they were able to succeed. I just love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we see. And what's super interesting about our students who not only sign up for tutoring, but also do mind, body, spirit release work is I am able to clear the traumatic imprints from them and go through all the charts and not only go through them with their parents, because I do the work with the parents. So while tapping into kids' energy, I can also relay that information to the tutors and have conversations with the tutors about, this child needs, one last week was, this child needs praise. That's what they were yearning. And so they were shutting down because they were feeling vulnerable every time there was a mistake made. And so,
Mm.
in order for the child to be more successful, it was tapping into this energy work so that I could have this conversation with the tutor. And the tutor, when I checked in with her after the clearing, was like, world of difference, you know?
I know. It's so amazing. It's so amazing. And let's just hop in maybe a little bit about the mind, body, spirit release
Yeah.
piece of this. For those of you who don't know, mind, body, spirit release is an energetic modality where you test blocks to that person's intention. So I'm assuming a lot of your students are, feeling more confident in the classroom, being able to sit and not feel anxious
Yeah.
about, classwork. I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit about some stories or highlights. You just gave a really good one, but
Yeah.
what are some of those success stories of students who release maybe some stress, some shame,
Yeah.
some guilt, some fear around learning, and then allowed them to feel safe about learning again?
I actually have one student who I've been working with for almost 2.5 years. When this child came to me, they were in middle school and they had a truancy issue at school because they didn't even want to go. They wouldn't leave the house. Um, and the school did everything to get this child to just come to school. The child had a 504, they had occupational therapy, they had regular therapy, they had, all of these things. And while working with this child, he has gone from attending school maybe once a week. I mean, it was bad when he was in middle school to now he's in high school and he misses one day a week, if that. And so, yeah, and he's feeling more confident about, who he wants to be, how he learns, and just, owning his individuality, I guess. And then, the barriers that were holding him back connected to some deeper trauma of why he didn't want to go to school. And then the trauma of showing up to school late or coming once a week then led to even more traumatic imprints on his system, because kids would be like, where are you? Why are you late? All of these judgments from the teachers. Your mom needs to get you there on time. And we were able to just eliminate any of that burden on his system. And now he's going to school and he's very successful at school, which is great. So that's one story that stands out to me of someone who I've worked with for a very long time. And I still continue to do clearings on him at least every 6 weeks, just to check in. Another is one of my clients is my daughter, and she had a very, very traumatic experience with school. We live in a mountain community where I often say going into the IEP meetings felt like stepping back in the 1950s. They weren't necessarily, the special ed team wasn't trained up to where they needed to be. And they weren't supporting my daughter in a cohesive manner. They continued to pull her out. She'd do different work, put her back in the middle of a lesson, and she'd have to catch up on that. Pull her out, put her back in. And so school was really traumatizing for her. I ended up placing her with one of my tutors who is just, an amazing teacher. And she also has children who are adopted. So she was able to connect with her on a level that I knew would be supportive of her. So in relieving that burden from myself as a parent and putting her with a tutor who I knew the curriculum that I built, I knew that she would help Lucy shine. But I was able to then focus on doing the clearings on her to remove the imprints. And so since then, we pulled Lucy from that school and moved her to a Montessori school where the support is much more cohesive and supportive of her learning and how she likes to learn. And we are seeing just brilliance come out of this child who otherwise was sat in a corner. They did not teach her when she was younger. They would sit her in a corner and she would go to school and they wouldn't talk to her. And my daughter is one of the most well-read kids there is because she listens to books constantly. She can have deep conversations about text. She thinks deep, but her processing is very slow and she's severely dyslexic. And so the want for the school was to have her immediately answer their questions or immediately write stuff down. And that wasn't how she learned. And so I have been able to support her energetically to remove the stress when it comes to sitting down and learning so that she's in an environment that supports her whole being. She is so successful and she's happy, which is something that I never thought would happen. And so, not only am I seeing this happen with my own students, and then, I'm seeing it happen with my kids. And so another story is we have kids come to us in first grade and they're not able to read anything. They're not able to hear isolated sounds. And I have a child I've been working with, and we're on 2 years now with Orton-Gillingham, and he's now scoring in the blue because it's not only that we're using the Orton-Gillingham approach, we're looking at the children when they're coming to us and seeing where that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn comes in the lesson. And then we pivot. It's where do I see a stress? Then we pivot. And so I'm working with my tutors too on looking at that and making sure they're trauma informed. And then we offer the MBSR too.
I love that. I think that, that trauma-informed piece combining with the MBSR and the learning, it's just sounds like just such a dream for parents who are, their kids are struggling with these things. And I love these success stories. I mean, what a success of going from maybe making it to school once a week to maybe missing once a week.
Yeah.
And then your daughter too, just thriving in an environment that supports her in a way that understands the way that she learns, I think is so important. And I can't help but think if these kids didn't have the support that they had now, how that could impact them later on with poor health outcomes and mental health diagnoses and not really being able to feel like they can succeed in college or career.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the big pieces that I talk to families about, because I think it's a misconception that reading is natural and everyone can just do because it's not. And there has to be a systematic, structured way, especially if you're struggling. And so I tell families, like, some kids can get by to third grade and they're doing great because they might have great background and knowledge. They might have great experiences in life. And a lot of kids who are dyslexic have amazing social skills and good vocabularies and great long-term memories. So when you have that from kindergarten to third grade, you are not a high flyer in the class. You are someone who comes in and can function in a class. And then our kiddos who then start to struggle with spelling in third grade, and then when the words get to become multisyllabic, they start to see themselves as different. And they wonder when they're sitting in the classroom, why can that kid do it and I can't? And then it impacts their mental health. And so, those are the kiddos that, I really feel for and want the parents to know, like, there is an intervention and that's what we do to support your child, because your child could potentially be a good reader at the beginning, but as it gets harder, they cannot decode words, and therefore it's not in that long-term memory. And so they're not able to pull it from their back pocket of what they know, and then they start to struggle. But then that's where the mental health stuff comes in, because a child who's been doing decent all along and then goes downhill, it's like that's hard on them emotionally. And so, that's why I love, like, sharing what we do with families, because this is the answer, really, supporting the kid emotionally as well as giving them the correct structure to become successful in the classroom. And we tap into their strengths, right? It's like they are coming to us with all of these strengths, and we want them to shine in those strengths and just fill in so that they shine in everything eventually. We have that type of student. And then we have the ones who struggle at the beginning. And so, we are here to help all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I want to step back too, because I think that, the mental health piece is so important, but I think too that learning disabilities as a whole are misunderstood,
Yes.
especially dyslexia. And, like you said, so many students, they may seem to be doing okay, and then they
Mhm.
start to struggle later on. And even adults suffer
Yes.
with this because they were never diagnosed, and they always kind of wonder, like, what's wrong with me? What's different with me? So, can you explain what dyslexia really is from just kind of like an educational
Yes.
standpoint?
Yes. And I feel like you are so correct when you say that it is so misunderstood, because a lot of people will say, like, oh, it's seeing letters backwards. Dyslexia has nothing to do with vision. Dyslexia is a phonological processing deficit within the brain. And so when we think about the components that it takes to learn to read, there is a visual component, there's an auditory component, and there's a meaning making component. And when the channels within the brain do not sync together, you are going to struggle in spelling, you are going to struggle in reading. And so when we see our dyslexic kids or adults, this is something that's common. Some of the things that we see as a commonality among them, you will see executive functioning struggles. Why do you see that? Because a lot of kids struggle with working memory and processing speed. That is a component of dyslexia that I think gets pushed under the rug and that teachers even don't understand. And that is school, right? Everything you do in school has to do with your processing and your working memory of what's happening in the moment. You're given instructions. You have to utilize the instructions that you're given orally. So that's phonological processing, and then utilize them to go. That's working memory. That is a
Mhm.
deficit across the board in the majority of dyslexic kids. And so even though children will get the intervention that they need, there is still going to be support needed at school. So a 504 or an IEP, when it comes to extended time, checklist given to kids to help them know the process of things written down, a check-in, all of these things, that is the number one thing that I see of where we're kind of like, as kids get older, teachers are like, oh, well, we'll do this for them. And it's like, no, the big school just the idea of school and how you function in school and how you're successful in school is where the deficit lies with a child with dyslexia. And so it's more than just reading and writing. And so that's the working memory and the rapid naming are, the like rapid naming processing speed are the components that are really big to look at for a child. And I always say to families, like, do you have a kid who you tell, like, get your shoes on, get your teeth brushed, grab your whatever, and they like come up with one sock? That is working memory. Like, that is the struggle. And you'll see it at home as well as, in the classroom. Also, children will struggle with isolating and manipulating individual sounds. So, and this is a huge component that many teachers aren't looking at. When we were assessing kids up until probably a couple years ago, they were giving DRA scores like, what's your reading level? And kids were reading books by trying to guess at words by looking at the pictures. This is poor reading strategies. Kids with good vocabularies, great background knowledge, good conversation skills could figure this out. And so they were getting these high levels when that really wasn't telling us. It wasn't telling us anything truly about what they knew. So if you assess a child and look at their phonological awareness, so that you want to see, can they isolate individual sounds in words and can they manipulate them? The reason being is because if you can pull that minute piece in your brain, you're going to be able to then pull it together to encode to spell, which then makes your writing more fluent. And then you'll be able to pull it together to string it together to read. And so it looks like this. So an example would be, say the word frog. Now say frog and don't say fog. Children who can't pull that sound away quickly are going to struggle with spelling. You start out really low and you see if a kid can pull out syllables. What you'll notice is many kids can't pull out syllables. Say the word bathtub. Now say bathtub and don't say tub. Like, a lot of kids cannot do that in a quick manner. And so that's where the misconception comes in. Because I think a lot of times at schools, they're looking, can a child read fluently? So can they read quickly and can they comprehend? And so you can kind of fluff this if there's pictures as a young child. But then when the pictures go away, you can't. And then you don't have decoding strategies. And so what we do is work with kids on hearing, isolating, and manipulating sounds, as well as applying that to reading. And in schools, they're starting to pull in the science of reading across the board, which is what I'm talking about, looking at all of these components and putting them into the curriculum. But again, teacher training is not up to par right now. So teachers are given curriculums. And what I'm noticing currently is kids are coming in and they can really see the isolated letters or graphemes and say them, but they cannot hear them and write them. And so it's like this full looping of the trajectory that you want to make sure kids are like building all their muscles in their brains. And so I think it's a misconception because I think a lot of times teachers will see kids reverse B's and D's and then do some reversals in writing and then have trouble sounding out things. And then they'll say that, oh, this is dyslexia, when that's really not dyslexia. It's deeper. It's deeper.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure that, there's adults that can, relate to their boss saying like, can you get this to me? Can you get this to me and this to me? And then they're like, wait, you said what again? And kind of needing that, like writing it down and not realizing that executive function piece is maybe missing from them because of something had been missed.
Yes.
As a child,
Oh, and I feel it so much because my working memory, I used to be a yoga teacher forever, and I always had to have a written out plan that I'd always go back to because I could not remember as the teacher what side I did, what I did. And I always laugh because I'm like, that's my dyslexia. But what's great is like for you and I, we know and have built these strategies of how to be successful. And I think someone along the way has supported us in saying like, you can do this. Like, here are some strategies. And it kind of like stuck. Whereas I think sometimes kids don't feel like they can do it and they don't have an adult in their corner or they don't know yet that all you have to do is write it down, or all you have to do is this, find your system. And I think with a little encouragement, like so many kids could figure out their systems and be successful in their own way of doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then they turn into adults that feel capable of taking on the world. And they don't have that anxiety and that shame and that guilt, and that
Yeah.
fear around, being successful in their job and their career and sharing their light with the world. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's like we think about kids as, little tiny people, but those tiny people grow up into adults who need to, have a purpose in the world. They need to bring their light. And if it's not cultivated at that young age, then like what are we stifling in our culture
Yeah.
of so much innovation and so much amazing giftings that are lost, right? If this work isn't done.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that so much. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Thank you for explaining all of that because I think it's really helpful. I think there's probably people who are listening to it right now thinking like, okay, that's my child or that's my
Yes.
little cousin or
Mhm.
or oh gosh, that was me when I was 5. And yeah, and just so listeners know, like you were saying, like us, like I was telling Bree, like I went through all of this when I was a kid and definitely had a lot of trauma of remembering being in a classroom and having to read out loud and not being able to get those, to be able to enunciate things or pronounce things the way that they should and just being I remember I have a full body response to it even now. Just
Yeah.
that feeling of like,
I was just gonna say when
you
you said
know,
that, I was like,
exactly, like full body panic. I probably need
Mhm.
to do an MBSR
Yeah,
around that for
me
myself,
too.
right? So, but I think we all can think about that. Even if we
Yeah.
didn't struggle with reading or dyslexia growing up, we all have that time where there was an educational trauma in a school setting that has probably echoed into our adulthood.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's why I love the work that you do because it does have long-term effects on your
Mhm.
nervous system. And also, like we were saying about that mental health piece, like you saw your daughter go from anxiety to
Yeah.
not having that anxiety with
Yeah.
the proper support.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just feel like there's so many kids who struggle with mental health that I think is started with, like, school trauma. It's not, and I don't envy teachers. They are doing the work. They're there every day, but they're spread so thin. And it's really hard to cater to everyone's needs. And so, especially kids with dyslexia who, as you're going through the working memory stuff within the classroom and you're like, so and so's behind again, or what, it's hard. It's hard. And so I think too, I work with adults as well and some teachers too, just because there's a traumatic imprint sometimes too within the work that
Mhm.
we want to make sure that they're feeling supported when they go in to support kids too.
Teachers have such a hard job and
Hmm.
such a beautiful job
Yeah.
at the same time, right? But I think that it's important to, if you feel like your child is struggling, to
Hmm.
get that extra support outside of the
Yes.
classroom and not rely on the school. You got to
Hmm.
be your own advocate for your child.
And
And
I
so
think
I know
know that
that
you're
you
not the,
experience that.
yeah. And I think know that you're not the expert because there are experts in literacy. And also, like, it's interesting because an expert in literacy and looking for those traumas. So, I think so oftentimes we get that, well, this is how I learned to read, or parents are forcing their kids to read because there's maybe like, you read 30 minutes with your kid, or have your kid read to you 30 minutes a day. And so what I always tell families is there are a lot of components in becoming a skilled reader, and you are building those as you are parenting your child. You can do it with movies. You can do it with board games. You can do it with experiences. It's really having intentional conversations with your kids, and don't mess up the bond that you have with your child by forcing them to read books that they're not ready for. My kids are audiobook listeners. I love audiobooks. I probably have listened to, like last year, I think I listened to 150 audiobooks because that's just something I love to do. My kids love listening to audiobooks. We listen to audiobooks in the car. My daughter and my son, both who are dyslexic, would never sit down and open a book and read to me. But when we think about why, it's because there was the traumatic imprint there. And so me forcing them to sound out words that they're not ready to sound out because they just don't have the synapses in the brain connecting yet is traumatizing them even more. So if I'm able to read to them and have conversations about the text, about like, how do you think this character feels? Is that kind? What would you do if this happened to you? And ask deeper level questions about the text, or just drive and listen to an audiobook and then have a conversation about it. That will build your child's reading and build your bonding with them and make them feel within the depths of their soul that reading isn't bad, that there's not this imprint there. And so I always say, don't force your child to read. If you can read the directions to them, if you can help them get to that deeper level thinking, that's what we want. We want people who are deep thinkers, critical thinkers, good people in this world. And when we have sometimes parents, you'll have the parents who'll be like, my first grader read Harry Potter. And it's like, well, great, they decoded Harry Potter. But like, did you have a conversation with them? Did they get into a deeper level? And that's what you really want, right? And so if you're a parent out there and you're just like, but the teacher says we have to read this much a night and my kid cries, it's like, just read to them, bond with them, have conversations with them, and you're building a skilled reader, truly. And then contact us and we'll do the other lifting around, helping them with their phonological awareness, helping them with decoding, and all of the other things that they need.
Absolutely. I love that. That's such a good kind of takeaway message from all of this too, is empowering the parents
Yeah.
to really cultivate safety around
Yes.
learning
Yes.
in their child, right?
Because if you think about when your kid's happy, like if they're playing sports or they're doing, and it's like, how do you cultivate that safety and security when it comes to learning, and making sure that they're not responding fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that doesn't mean that they, won't continue to maybe show those traumatic responses, but that's where the MBSR comes in. And it's like, how do we then create an intention for the clearing to help them be ready to come to the table to learn, and also in a sense help their parents know what to say and do, because each of the clearings that I do on our students, it can look different. The one I was talking about earlier was the child didn't want to seem vulnerable and weak, and she needed praise. There are other kids who, different things. And so you don't find out what they need until you do the clearing and go through the charts to see where the imprints are lying, Like, is the child going to be angry if you bring up that they forgot to do this? If you know that, then how can you support them on the front end before it happens?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the best parts about Mind Body Spirit Release is the self-awareness that you get from
Mm-hmm.
it, especially like if you're an adult, in a session. But I think that the parents then kind of get this like awareness of what is really
Yeah.
inside their child and what's really brewing as far as these deeper limiting beliefs or emotional blocks
Yes.
and things. And so then that can give them that such an empowered tool that
Yes.
they would never have, right? Because even I think these little guys, they don't know how to even express these big emotions sometimes, like you're saying. How do they know that
Yeah.
they need praise? How
Yeah.
can they communicate that at 5 years old,
Yeah.
you know?
You know what? That made me think of another client I had a few years ago who he was a fifth grader and he had been tutoring for a couple years, and we were doing clearings on him, and the limiting belief came up that there's not enough time. And I had said to the mom, talk to me a little bit about what this means to you, what you know about your child. Why might you think he would have this imprint of there's not enough time? And she was like, my gosh, that is me. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, my threat to him. And she didn't mean it as a threat, right? She meant it as like, to get him in gear for middle school, right? And she would kept saying to him, middle school's right around the corner. You need to really get this down. Middle school is right there and no one's going to help you in middle school. And so it was kind of like that thing that we say as a parent to kind of like get a fire under the bottom of our kids to like, to start moving. But here, this child had worked with a tutor twice a week and was doing really well, but still felt this traumatic imprint that he felt the 2 years prior when he just initially started. And this idea of middle school coming up was like unknown, right? And so the imprint came every time his mother would say these things. It was reinforcing this limiting belief of there's not enough time. Like I'm never going to catch up. And so it was really great conversation that I had with the mom, and we brainstormed like, what can you say instead? What can you say to make him feel supported instead of like this, time clock ticking down? And it was really great. And she was able to shift her parenting. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known, right? She would have no idea that this is what her words were doing. And all parents want to do is like support their kids. And so that's what I think is the power of MBSR too, is that it just gives you this insight that you would otherwise not have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I think that it's just so beautiful just how whole person approach you take and the work that you do with your niche and with MBSR and with the learning and dyslexia specialty. I think it's so needed. And I really hope that if there's parents listening today, that maybe they rethink some of the things that they're saying to their kids, right?
Yeah.
Or they may even rethink how they're speaking to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe based on some things that they experienced in their educational journey. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to what we've talked about today, but I'd love to just kind of open the floor for that too.
Well, and I think too, it goes to parents and their imprints when it comes to schooling too. So if you weren't good at math, and that's a common one. A lot of parents are like, I don't know how to do this new math. I'm not good at math. And they put that onto their kids, and there's the messaging. I stink at math. I stink at math.
Mm-hmm.
When what I realized is I wasn't great at math because of part of my dyslexia. The working memory and rapid naming is the algorithm memorization of math. So back when I went to school, everybody had to just learn multiplication tables and division and whatever, and it had to come to you like this. I always laugh. I still can't play blackjack in Vegas because I cannot add small numbers really quickly. I can't do it. We all have calculators now. It's totally fine. But
Exactly.
when I went into a classroom where they were doing it differently. And I think a lot in pictures. And I was like, oh my gosh, here was an opportunity for me to learn a different way. And so sometimes the reason that you push back on certain things is because you just weren't taught the right way or a different way. And so, I think the way they teach math kind of gets a bad rap these days because it's weird and people are like, oh, just memorize this stuff. But if it can open up a window for a child to see it in a different way and actually digest it, then it's like, oh, you can still do it your way, but here's another way if somebody else wants to do it. And I think, the conversation about school and learning sometimes and even reading, it's like you must read books rather than listening to audiobooks. I think just being really open about like, everybody is different, and that's what's great. And everybody learns differently, and everybody has a different light. And we don't want to dim the light because we either learned a different way and it worked for us, or we didn't like it and we're just going to, announce that. So we don't want our kids to like, automatically hate something because we didn't like it. And so I think just go into supporting your kid with an open mind and being thoughtful about and just being like just kind of analytical when it comes to your kid and just like, what do they do well? What are their strengths? Why do they like this certain thing versus this certain thing? And you'll start to put the pieces together and really see like they're telling a story. And that's, and And it's okay sometimes if they don't want to learn it a certain way or the way that you did. And just be open to, looking also for that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, because they'll show you if they're struggling. And know that there are people out there to help you, coach you in parenting with mind, body, spirit release, as well as, supporting the whole child. And I am just so grateful that I feel like I am just so grateful that my path led me to this, because if I wasn't dyslexic, if my two children didn't present very differently with dyslexia, I have a third child as well who's a very English language learner. He was adopted at 4 from China. And so I have that component coming in too, where I'm looking at second language learning and how that component comes in. And so I think having my 3 very unique, challenging children has led me to understand kids in such a round way that I was able to not only get training in trauma-informed teaching, connected parenting, Orton-Gillingham. It's just a really special niche that I think helps, and mind, body, spirit release that can help a whole child and a whole family, and kind of shift the trajectory of someone's life. And that's why I love doing the work that I do. I'm sure you feel the same with the work that you do. It's just like you're shifting the trajectory of people's lives. It's lovely.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's so beautiful. And I mean, that's what this podcast is all about too, right? Is like shifting our culture from sickness to health. And how
Yeah.
can we, you know, shift that trajectory of a young child who could have mental health outcomes that
Yeah.
aren't as great if they don't have this work done at a young age. Because I know that, there's a lot of statistics about like, if you have dyslexia, you're more likely to be incarcerated
Yes.
or, not go to college and have some really poor health outcomes and things like that. And um, so I think getting that support at a young age, as well as that trauma
Yeah.
healing piece, can really shift our culture
Yes.
in a really powerful way, and have ripple effects, like you said, beyond the family to the schools and the whole community as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge ripple effects on society. And I think when we work to elevate society, and that's what I think is sometimes the missing piece. Like a lot of people are working like just specifically within a smaller subsets. But it's like if we work to elevate all of society and look to support them in raising it up, like how healed and how wonderful would society be? Because you're right, the rate of kids that are incarcerated and are dyslexic is significantly high. And why does this happen? Well, it happens because a lot of times, like, the intervention is expensive. Number one. And so if you are in an inner city school and you're coming from poverty, it's really hard to get the support that you need and the advocacy that you need. If I could raise a magic wand, it would be to like support kids who are coming from poverty stricken areas, to give the teachers the correct training to support not only the trauma there, but also have that structured literacy. And then, when children of all socioeconomic backgrounds are going to a place every day and then they're getting reprimanded and reprimanded, the traumatic imprints there, and then they act out. And then they act out. Oftentimes schools want behavior plans or behavior, modification strategies. And I always say, figure out how to teach the kids to read. You'll lower that stress, and there'll be less behavior challenges within the classroom, and learn who your kids are. And I think, like you said, we want to elevate society, and support all kids in learning. And yeah, and I can do only a subset in my little area, but my advocacy reaches far. And so thank you for allowing me to share my expertise too with parents and maybe even dyslexic adults, who are like, oh yeah, that was me. And I didn't even realize it until now.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you said that also beautifully, Bree. And I think even adults, right? Like I
Mhm.
think so many adults are realizing that they have ADHD
Yes.
or, even they had anxiety. Like I didn't know I had anxiety until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
That's when people were talking about what anxiety was. I was like, oh, I like freak out and I get really
Yeah.
worried. And, I have these kind of like weird headaches sometimes, like
You're like,
all
wait a
the classic
second.
things. That's anxiety. But,
Yeah.
if that could have been caught at a younger age, how much more had we been able to cope and get that support that we needed into adulthood, and how I don't know, I just think our whole world could be changed, like you said.
And just know that you're not different. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's the hard part. So have you ever seen the Holderness family? Penn Holderness has ADHD. And every time I watch his little videos, I'm like, that is me. That is me. And I think at a young age, I would always get in trouble for things. It was like, you left the cabinet door open. You left this over here. You forgot this. And that's just how I function. And I function well. I get it done. But I think, there was shame and guilt around that. And there was that not enough worthiness. And I don't think I recognized that until as an adult, getting mind, body, spirit release on myself and going through that understanding to realize no, it's okay. You just have to come up with your own system. And so probably similar to you with your anxiety, it's like, it's okay. We just have to not have shame and guilt and unworthiness around it. And that's why
Totally.
the
Yeah.
MBSR is so great, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think too, just the executive functioning piece, I've realized, that's something I have a hard time with. Like, I think most people probably think I'm a super clean person. I am not. I have a really hard time. I leave the cabinets open, I leave the jar there, and, and then I'm off on my own little journey. And then I come back and I'm like, who made this mess? I'm sure
Oops.
you feel the same thing. But I realize that when I'm in a more fight or flight mode,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm more prone to not, finish task or,
Yeah.
kind of go through all that. When I am getting that support that I need through mind, body, spirit release and mindfulness practices, when we really dig into all that, those things tend to alleviate, right?
Or
Those kind of
benefit us,
patterns of behavior.
right? I feel
Yeah.
like there's a certain component of my ADHD that I like once I'm supported with mind, body, spirit release or energetically, and I'm doing my meditation practice and I'm working out and all of the things, I can get
Yeah.
really hyper focused and get a lot of stuff done. And it is
Yes.
phenomenal. And I think it was interesting when I was younger, I would hyper focus to people please and be a perfectionist,
Mm,
which kept my nervous system elevated. And as I get older, it's like, no, I need to you know, calm down the nervous system, take the time for it because in the end, it's so much better. But it came with age.
yeah. Well, and to recognizing the gifts, right? And
Yeah.
harnessing them in a way that's beautiful and helpful, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel the same way. It's like I can just knock stuff out or,
Hmm.
get something done. But, like you said, it's when the nervous system is in that place where it can really be beneficial, right? It's not
Yeah.
like hyper focusing on I'm going to clean out my closet
Yeah.
right now. Um,
When I have
but
all of
actually
these
I'm going to
deadlines.
yeah, exactly, and I have all these deadlines, but actually, getting that work done that you need to do and feeling
Yeah.
safe to
Yeah.
do the work you need to do, and so, instead of kinda, procrastinating with another hyper focus thing.
Yeah.
So, totally, and I think that's the beauty of MBSR. I know I see it in my clients, and I
Mhm.
know that you see it in yours, and we've obviously are huge fans of it ourselves, by getting this work done ourselves, doing it on ourselves, seeing other practitioners, and I think, one takeaway, I think, like you said, is, not being afraid to get that outside help.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, because it's through outside help that we are able to get a different lens on things and understand it a little bit more, the why behind it, right? And I think it benefits everyone when you have somebody else looking and helping and guiding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Bree, for being a guest on the Body Ethos podcast. This was such a fun conversation. I think
Yeah.
a
Thanks
really
for having me.
impactful one. Just, of course, yeah, just how this topic really does have a ripple effect negatively or positively
Yeah.
into adulthood and into our society. So that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I think that it's not something that seems obvious in this kind of mission to shift the culture from sickness to health. But for me, as someone who experienced that type of trauma in childhood, it had far reaching impacts into my overall health and
Yes.
the anxiety that I had and had to overcome in
Hmm.
adulthood and, autoimmune conditions when we
Yeah.
feel unworthy, right?
Yes.
We that self-attacking of the immune system. And so, kind of all goes back to that unsafety in the nervous system that I felt at a young age for a variety of different reasons, but definitely education trauma being one of them. So I love the work that you're doing because I think you are truly shifting the culture and elevating the culture, as you said.
Thank
So
you.
I wanted to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
There was a lot of different things we talked about in this podcast, but maybe is there one thing, one practical or impactful way that someone listening today can start helping this mission of shifting the culture, supporting children, even healing their own educational trauma? What is maybe that one thing? I know it's a loaded question.
Man, I think we all go to school. We all have gone to school. And I think educational trauma, I don't even think is a word that's being highlighted in higher research at all. It's something that I have, come about from all the work that I'm doing. And I think school has been so impactful for so many of us and has shifted our trajectory. And I think either as an adult, if you're noticing limiting beliefs or you're noticing, you react in certain ways, like think about, go back to your childhood and your school days and why might you be thinking that way? I think just being really reflective and then seeking out support if you need it. And as parents, I think that's a bigger thing. As parents, we want to do the best for our kids always. And if you in your gut know that your child is struggling, and you can see it emotionally at home, oftentimes you see it emotionally at home because they hold it together at school, and then they burst at home. If you see your child struggling at home emotionally and they are also struggling, that's when it's time to reach out to an expert. And don't wait. Don't wait, because the longer you wait, the more the traumatic imprint, the deeper it gets, the harder it gets to shift. And we want to catch it early and support. We want kids to be happy, continue to be happy and confident. And so I think oftentimes as parents, we know in our gut, something's going on, something's not right. And sometimes you can't shift, you can't pull your kid from the school and homeschool. Not everyone can do that. And sometimes schools are like, just wait, they'll get it. Just wait, they'll get it. That's the worst advice. I think, if you feel in your heart that something is going on, reach out to someone. I do free consultations to support families because I really feel like this will elevate our society if we help all kids. And so you don't necessarily have to get That's another thing. That's 3 things. I'm so sorry. You do not have to get a diagnosis of dyslexia, ADHD, whatever, to get the intervention, to get the support. And so if you have a good person who knows structured literacy and how to analyze student behavior and student data, then they're going to be able to support you in the correct way. Because what's going to happen is if you spend the thousands of dollars to get the neuropsych evaluation, which is the only way you can diagnose dyslexia, you're still going to have the same intervention. So I always say to families, if you know in your gut, reach out, get the intervention before the evaluation with the diagnosis.
Amen to that. I think the same exact thing I say to clients is, why wait until you have a disease to start taking care of your body?
Yeah. Do it now. Yesterday. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. But you can do it today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Why wait for a diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis when you could be supporting optimal thyroid levels now until it becomes a full-blown autoimmune condition? Same with reading interventions, I think, as well. Why wait until there's more traumatic imprints and there's a real struggle and we're super behind to get that help that your child needs? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Such good takeaways. Thank you so much, Bree.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this episode of the Body Ethos Podcast. I hope this conversation with Bree really helped you understand this idea of educational trauma and how we can better support children in their learning journey, both emotionally and physically. If this episode resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Please subscribe, leave a review, share it with a parent, a friend, a family member that may need this message today. And also, if you're looking for resources and updates and ways to get in touch with Bree or myself, be sure to check out the show notes below. And remember that healing happens when we address the root cause. So whether that's on a physical level or maybe that learning level or that emotional level, and also more importantly, when we create a safe and supportive environments for growth, right? Thank you so much for bringing that message to the podcast today, Bree.
Thank
Until
you.
next time, let's keep shifting the culture from sickness to health together. Have a great day.